Alright, well, I said I'd do a replay of this, and I appreciate this a little bit later than I intended, but this is one of my laps earlier in the week. It's actually the first time I managed to get into the 105s, when we had that big hosted practice session. Now, what my actual qualifying time was a 5:9:30. I think that an 8 is actually possible, but the lap would have to be really perfect. But I figured that I can kind of just play the lap and then talk over each corner and each approach a little bit. So that's what we're gonna do here, and I'll talk around as we go the out lap, and then I'll watch the main lap without any commentary, and then I'll go and break it down corner by corner, and hopefully this will help some guys out. In terms of outlap prep, there's really nothing special. The tires on this car are they're completely bulletproof, so there's no advantage to going slow or pushing hard. It's really just whatever works for you. I mean, we have a 4 lap qualifying, so there's not a huge amount of pressure. I don't think, to get the laps perfect, and you can actually run the minimum amount of fuel, and you'll kind of get 2 stabs at it, which is what I did last night. So the carousel is actually a really critical corner, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the main thing to note about it is obviously it's really banked, and you can definitely use that to your advantage. There's a couple of different approaches through there too that we'll talk about as well. The last 2 corners is really just about not making mistakes. There's not a huge amount of time to be gained through here. It's more not losing time. They're pretty much 90-degree corners, so they're not going to gain you a lot, but they will lose you a lot, kind of thing. But we'll watch the lap in full without any com, and then I'll do it corner by corner. Alright, so a little bit scruffy, but it got the job done. So now I'll talk it through corner by corner, and hopefully this will help some guys out. So coming down to 1, it's obviously a difficult braking zone because it's downhill, and honestly, it's probably the most critical corner on the track, just both mentally and actually in terms of what it gives you. So you can see here I'm pretty heavily on the brake already before I'm actually at the 300, and if we step it back, we can find exactly where I brake. It's pre this yellow light. The thing is, with reference points at this track, it's actually pretty difficult, because obviously with a GT car you'd be used to braking using those marker boards, and I've noticed that anytime I try and tell people reference points, I'm actually braking a little bit before the things that I talk about. So I would say this caution light, but as you'll see, I'm actually on the brake before you get to the caution light. But you get the idea. So the caution light is the reference point, and then as you come down into 1, the big thing is not sliding as you come off the corner, because you can slide this car without a severe penalty, but it's still not good to do it if you can help it. And the thing I really want to focus on here is coming into this turn. You can see this curving on the inside here. If you can see, it's kind of dual profile, where one is obviously got a lot of rubber marks on it, and the other has no rubber marks on it at all. Now, you can also see, if I step it forward just a little bit, you can actually see that the curve changes a little bit earlier than the end of those rubber marks. So you don't want to be on this raised section of the curve, because that will throw you to the outside of the corner. But you do want to use as much of it as you can. So as you'll see here, I kind of I definitely run over it. I actually just get on it a little bit, and this is what I'm saying. This lap isn't exactly 100% perfect. Yes, it's a good lap, but it's little areas like this which can be a little bit better. So ideally, you don't actually want to be on this race section of the curb. Now, you'll see a little bit why, because here you'll see that I actually come off the corner kind of sideways, and this isn't perfect. This isn't great. You want to come off here straight as you possibly can, because that carries speed all the way, really realistically, all the way up the hill. Now, this next corner is pretty tricky too, and you don't want to push this too hard. You actually want to turn in earlier than you think. And the big thing with the Lotus 49 is always using the track camber to your advantage, because the car has no aero at all. It has 0. But the track camber really helps the car set into the corner in a suspension sense. So you really want to use that as much as you can. So the goal here is to turn in early. You can actually get onto this white curve. Now, it's not entirely necessary. I think it's better to use the white curve. But if it unsettles the car for you to the extent that you don't feel comfortable doing it, you're not going to lose out a huge amount. The big thing is trying to straighten out the course as much as possible. And you'll see that throughout the lap, that's really my goal at every single opportunity, is to run really, really tight lines, actually, kind of tighter lines than you'd be expecting. And a lot of that is to keep the back end of the car in check and to keep forward momentum rolling, really. You can slide the car, it's forgiving in that sense, but it's not fast to do so, because with the 49, the thing it's really, really good at is powering down out of corners. It's not great at really anything else. It's not great at going through corners. It's not great at stopping for corners. But man, for how much it weighs, the amount of power it's got, it really flies off of corners. So that's the thing where you're really going to get your lap time from. You'll see again on the left-hander, again, same deal. You don't have to use this curb. I like to, but only the white section. And then this is a really, really, really tricky part of the lap here. So as you're coming around this right-hander, if you just go full matte, there's a very, very high probability that the rear is going to kick out, and we'll kind of watch it in full speed this whole section here. And you'll see a little bit what I mean. So coming through here, I'm trying to keep this as tight as possible, which is why I'm on the white curb. And then again on the left, one thing I've also found with this car is that I would use the brakes a lot with a GT car to try and get the nose to rotate. I can't make that work with this car. My only way of getting it to rotate is kind of abrupt throttle lifts. So if you're used to using the brakes to kind of point the nose in the mid corner, I wouldn't really advise it. Maybe your setup can do it, but mine definitely cannot. So you'll see coming through the right hander, I'm kind of really dancing on the wheel, trying to keep it straight. Like all the way through here, you'll see if you look at the wheel, it's all about keeping as much forward momentum as possible, because then it carries all the way down this straight. Now, as you come to the carousel's really, really difficult. It's actually easier with the chicane, because with the chicane in there, you arrive at the carousel obviously a lot slower, and the track is actually kind of now profiled a little bit with that chicane in mind. So this run without it is difficult, and you can kind of see why already, because it's totally blind. And my reference points here is actually these cones that you'll see we're approaching on the right. I brake earlier than the cones, but I'm staring at the cones as I'm coming into brake here. And again, this is another corner where you can take advantage of the track camber, and you'll see that I go to the inside and turn in a lot earlier than you might think you should do. And that's all about trying to get onto that area of the track where so that when I'm heavy on the brakes, the car has actually got a little bit more grip, so I can be heavier on the brakes without having to worry about using some of the tire grip to actually stop me sliding out to the outside of the carousel. So you see here, I start to go a little bit to the inside, and normally you would think for a corner like this, you'd actually want to probably be, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you can sort of see where the track changes in surface about maybe 1 to 2 car lengths ahead of us here. Normally, for just a regular kind of flat corner like this, you'd actually probably want to still be all the way to the outside here, but this is what I'm talking about, using the track camber to your advantage. You can see I'm kind of really sort of early apex in here. A little bit of a slide, so that's not great. But there's 2 approaches to this corner. One, you can either really bomb it in super hard. I don't like to do that because I think it's really, really high risk. And the other is to try and hug the inside as much as possible. But again, it's the same thing. It's getting the car pointed in, and it's getting the hammer down so that you can come off the corner with as much speed as possible, because this is a really, really critical corner in terms of the lap time. You can see I'm trying to shorten, well, I'm trying to straighten the exit as much as possible. I do use this white curb on the inside here, and the whole reason to that is so that when you come out to this outside bit, you can just be hammer down. You can see on the gas, and even though the car's sliding, I have the room to use it, and on the best laps, you'll actually be using that little bit of strip on the outside there. Now, this last two corners, as I was saying, it's more about not making mistakes. And I'm again, it's hard to use the marker points. I'm braking actually more at the end of the bridge than I am using these boards. You do want to try and push this track width as much as you can, but again, it's about keeping tight lines. If you just kiss this inside curb with the left front, that's pretty good. You can also use these concrete pads to sort of follow your way around the track. You can see here I'm actually pushing a little bit wide, but by the exit, I'm in the concrete pad, so we're good. You can use the white curb on the outside a little bit. Don't necessarily advise it, can upset it, and it can make it difficult to get the car back to the left of this last corner. This last corner is where you can really, really easily screw a good lap. So you've got to just focus on not overdriving the corner. Again, use the concrete pads on the track, kiss the curb with the right front, and you can see here we're kind of tracking all along this concrete pad towards the exit. Actually, probably lost a little bit of speed in the mid corner, but you see it works out by the exit. A little bit heavy on the gas there, so that's not great. But hopefully that gives you a good idea of kind of what you got to do in terms of getting the car around the track, what's critical, and there's a couple of areas that you can sort of work on to maybe gain a little bit more speed.